So obviously you've been thinking about Britain and freedom, nature, because you put a lot of effort in, you know, picking up all garbage that we see or use. And lately you've spent a lot of time thinking about this privacy versus what I'm telling you about Sweden, about allemansrätt.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons, English people are so private, but at the same time quite generous, I'm finding, is we've just got such a lack of space. I mean, there's so many of us. Each person there isn't a lot of space that each person has. And then when you are allowed access onto land, it's always with restrictions. So you're not supposed to camp. You always have to be following the footpath unless it's an open access land. And even then, apparently, in the whole of England, we've only got 865,000 hectares of open access land, and even that comes with a load of restrictions on what you can and can't do there. So we don't have, in my opinion, a huge amount of freedom.
But is that something you've discovered on this trip?
I think I was first aware of it when I went to Canada. I went to the national park, one of the national parks there. But even the space, huge amount of space outside the national park, there's wilderness, and for the first time it hit me what concept of wilderness was. It's like, wow, this is wilderness. You could see trees and lakes, as far as you could see. It's like, wow, we really miss out on this in the UK. There are a few places when you get that sense of wilderness. You do in Scotland and Wales and Ireland, but I mean, actually in England, there's not a huge sense of that. I think you get a small taste of it in counties like Cumbria, Northumberland. But most of the time, everyone's just fighting for space and privacy.
What was the most common question you got when you were working? Was it the London something trust?
London Wildlife Trust. I was working on an education project which was helping young people, like pupils, youth groups, getting to use these nature reserves, which are all over London and absolutely fantastic and beautiful. And quite often at the end of a session, the kids that had come along would ask me, can I come here by myself? Am I allowed to be here? Because there's perception that they weren't allowed access to this bit of nature. So they needed permission to be there. I think it's part of our national psyche to always be asking permission to be in places, permission to stay in places. It's just permission the whole time.
Are you getting fed up with it? What can it be? Could it be done better?
I think there are a few places that are quite enlightened. I think if you look at, like, for example, Dartmoor National Park, they have you're allowed to wild camp in Dartmoor National Park, and I think that's it's unusual for England, but it's quite an enlightened approach. I would love to see more of that.
Is somebody using Dartmoor? Is it used more, do you know, than the other park?
I can't remember the statistics on it, but it might be one of the parks actually it's not used a huge amount.
You also said the other day that, we just don't see any people on these public footpaths, on where you are actually allowed to be. Have we seen a lot now?
I think there's
you thought that was due to what?
I think people genuinely don't feel they've got a right to be in those spaces, or they don't know about them quite often. Certain organisations such as the National Trust are doing a really good job of allowing people access to green spaces, but then also that's a little bit of a commercial organisation. You have to pay to be there, whereas you've got the Canal Trust, which, as we've seen, has these fantastic tranquil spaces. But quite often, walking along them, and we maybe see 2 people an hour. When we were just, we were just outside of Moss Side, and there was that beautiful stretch of, I can't remember what it was now, it's canal or river, really green, and we were maybe an hour from Moss Side, but no one using it.
Let us ask Nigel what he thinks about all this.
Definitely.
I'll catch up with you. I need some